Good morning, growers. It is fall. It is finally that time of the year where here in South Florida we get to grow anything our heart desires. I think it's important to make a distinction of what fall gardening means here for us. In the rest of the country, is the end of their summer, the end of their growing season, and they want to squeeze in a few crops before they get their first freeze or frost. Here in South Florida, we barely see any frost, and if we do, it's maybe for an hour or so in the morning, maybe twice a year, and it's not enough, it's not long enough to kill things like our tomatoes and such. So for us here in South Florida, it really marks the beginning of our growing season when it's not humid and rainy and hot to the point to kill everything we try to grow. So while the rest of the country is figuring out their first frost date and counting backwards and see what they have time to grow, here we have to look at our average temperatures and see when is the best time to grow certain crops. For example, you can get ahead of your growing season by starting things like peppers, tomatoes, and eggplants in a protected area. In my case, I start mine under my porch where they still get morning sun, but they don't get constantly rain on. And I start them in August, and I transplant them the beginning of October, where the rain are beginning to slow down, the temperatures are cooling down, and the pest pressure has started to slow down. I think is an awesome tip for everyone to write down when you started your crops, when you started your seeds, what seeds you started, what varieties, when they germinated, and at what time you put them outside. Because let's say you start them at a certain date, they grew fine, you put them outside, and then they got completely devastated by worms or humidity. You know that that was not the right time, and next year you will start them later on. Also, since I don't live on a farm, I just have a backyard garden, I like to draw my growing space and divide it by square feet, so I know exactly how many plants I can fit in, and I can plant accordingly. I don't need to plant too many or too little. I always like to plant just a little more just in case something dies, so I don't waste that space. So tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, native flowers, warm season flowers, you can start all of that under a protected area by the end of August, second week to third week of August, and you can transplant them outside by the end of September, beginning of October. Things that are still considered warm season in the rest of the country, like corn, beans, squash, I would recommend planting around the second to the third week of September, straight in the ground. Those big seeds like beans, squash, corn, they don't do very well when you transplant them, because the first thing they do is put like a very long deep root. So if you damage the roots transplanting it, they never fully recover. So they even grow and they can give you fruit, but it never reaches that full potential. So you might get like a plant that it gets sickly, or it doesn't produce as much, or in the case of corn, ends up producing very little corn. Does that mean that you can do it? No, you can totally do it, and I've done it before and I have some success before, but I've noticed that it just simply does much better just put it straight in the ground. Especially with corn, you want to plant like a big space of corn, so we're talking probably like 20 or more plants of corn. So transplanting every single plant, the chances that you damage some, it gets higher. And for beans as well, like how many plants I have, probably like something like 20 plants, and they grow so fast. Like you put a bean seed in the ground, the next 3 days already like this big. So I don't really feel the need to protect them for like something like tomatoes and peppers that stay like very tiny for weeks. Now, my favorite crops, the one that I wait all year to grow, brassicas. What are brassicas? Brassicas are broccoli, our leafy greens, cauliflower, cabbages, things that really hate the heat. So we have a very small window here in South Florida to grow, and that starts right now. If you're watching this video, you haven't started your brassicas, do it right now. So yes, October, second week of October, I would say for here in South Florida is the best time to start your brassicas outside, straight in the ground. They'll do just fine. It is also a great time to start things like carrots, potatoes, onions, dill, celery, your herbs. Pretty much, making a very few exceptions, you can start everything now. And as a matter of fact, today I'm sowing my carrots, so I'm gonna show you how I do that, and I'm gonna show you around the garden. So let's begin in this flower bed area. I have a blue plumbago, gomphrena, sweet potato vine. My little dahlias from cuttings are just beginning to bloom. Mexican torch sunflower coming this way. I have just begun to espalier my elderberry tree. Little spicy peppers are growing well. This is Ichiban eggplant from last year. Some Rosa Bianca eggplant. Tomatoes. This is Piennolo del Vesuvio, an Italian heirloom. Black Beauty. Some white eggplants and another Ichiban. This one is a Cuban heirloom. It's called Rignon, Ribble Delight tomato. Some more spicy peppers, and I just began to espalier my mulberry tree. This is my first time, so don't judge me. On this side, I have some of my squashes and green beans, which I think I've seen some green beans coming already. And more green beans, tomatillos. This is my flower area. These are all native. So we have white indigo baptisia, red tropical sage. That is Rudbeckia, black eye Susan. And this is our native milkweed, swamp milkweed, still very small. And these are non-native flowers. We have some straw flowers, bergamot, verbena, and this is a flamingo celosia. Over here is cosmos, still very small, but they're beginning to bloom. There's a double click, I think. This one is a double click, like the petals have like this funky shape. And there's also an apricot one. Here's my little banana tree. And on this side, it repeats the same pattern. It's funny because all of these flowers were started at the same time. And you can see how different varieties perform different. Like tropical sage is already blooming, the flamingo is just beginning to bloom, while things like Rudbeckia, bergamot, and verbena are still very small. Some more milkweed. I have to be very on top because it gets very quickly aphids. So since it's so small, it can survive this many aphids, so I have to be constantly picking them off. So on this side, I have some cardinal basil. My corn is all here, and more green beans. This is my new raised bed areas. There's two 2x8 and the castle oyster from Veggies in the middle. On this side I have all tomatoes, and on this side peppers. And in the grow bags is all potatoes and sunflowers. While this middle in-ground bed is bush dahlia. So as far as varieties, in the front is all Tasmanian chocolate, which actually, look at that, the first clump of flowers. And in the back, so these are determining tomatoes, so they're gonna bush out, but they're not gonna grow that tall. While in the back, they're indeterminate tomatoes. So we have two Dr. Witches, one Piagnolo red, the one on the other side was a yellow, and two Sungold. So that's what we had in the back. In this raised bed is two variegated jalapenos, 2 and 2. Some petunias, the idea is that they come out and bush out. And a little lacinato kale, and here is where we're gonna plant our carrots. For sowing my carrots, I'm gonna make 2 little trenches. I'm gonna try to keep them about a foot apart. Gonna sprinkle my carrot seeds. Now, I'm not gonna cover the seeds with soil because that will make it difficult for the seeds, since it's so small, to germinate and pop through the soil. So I'm just gonna lightly push them down, pat them down, just like that. I'm gonna cover the seeds with this cardboard. The reason I want to do that is because carrot seeds need to be moist at all time until germination. So the sun tends to dry that first layer of soil, so the second they start coming out, they dry right away and die. While this allows me to keep it moist. Now, carrot seed can take up to 14 weeks to germinate. So I'm gonna be checking every single day. As soon as I see them pop out of the ground, I know that I have to remove this because they need to get sun right away or they'll die. So as far as the peppers, these are all sweet peppers. We have some Lecia, Purple Beauty, an albino bullnose, and paprika. The potatoes, we have some red Norlands and yellow Yukon Golds. The red ones are taking a little longer to sprout. I see one coming out right there, while the Yukon Gold are coming out faster. I have some more tomatoes over here and a cucumber. This is a Ace 55, and on this side a cucumber. This one is a Space Master, so it doesn't grow that large vines. And I have the same thing happening on this side, Ace 55 and Space Master cucumber. And you see I have, since these are grow bags, so tend to grow faster, and these are water meaty plants, I put some Oyas, and I noticed that the tomatoes and the cucumber are doing beautifully. On this side, that it looks empty, but it's not, I planted 2 days ago all my broccoli and all my cauliflowers. While on this side, I have some of my zucchini, celery, and calendula are here, while this one hasn't been planted yet. So here is where I have my Roma tomatoes, and I have some more on this side. Here are my raspberries that are doing great, and some strawberries. Moving on this side, I have some dahlias in containers, and in the ground is a giant amaranth. Here are butterfly pea vine, fully loaded, as well as my Brazil that I definitely need to harvest. Look how big these calyxes are. And I just recently planted these beds, but here is pretty much Asian greens and some mustard, while cabbages, dill are on this side. And on the back, they're still very small, but there's some dahlias. I hope you guys enjoy spending a little time with me and perhaps got some inspiration. I would love to hear what you guys are growing, what you're having success with, what are you most excited about. For example, I'm very excited about my brassicas, broccoli, and also my onions. Like last year, I didn't have a lot of success with onions. They stay very small because I planted them too late. So I just planted a couple of days ago my onions, and I can't wait to see how they do this year. So thank you so much for watching. If you haven't, please, I would love you to consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video.